Hello and welcome to another episode of Cristo Putting the World Right. This is episode 7. I think it is episode 7. Is it episode 7? It is. It's the first of 2025. I do know that. And I'm joined by the wonderful Benedict Spence. He's our 7th favourite Conservative commentator. Hello, Benedict.
Oh, but it's not true because I was the first guest. We've simply come round again. I can only
I'm
be
running out
sixth.
of people. That's the
I can only
problem.
be sixth. Yeah, think about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because you're the 7th guest and you are the... So you've moved up.
Oh,
Happy
yeah.
New
I
Year!
have. Oh, yes, absolutely. Things are going so well. I'm starting 2025 off of very, very positively.
How are you, dear?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm rather sleepy today. I don't know why. I do know why. It's because I went to the gym for a very long time, and I'm not used to that sort of physical exertion. So
Oh,
now my body's going, that's quite enough of that. We need to hibernate. We need to
is
curl up.
this a New Year's resolution?
Why not? I mean, at this point, it's it's trying to push water uphill at this point anyway. I'll have given up by February probably. Yes, we'll call it a New Year's resolution.
But I've never heard you once say that you've gone to the gym before,
Yeah, no,
since I've
I
known
just
you.
I, look. I am motivated now. I have found from somewhere within, at the age of 32, which I know comes as a real shock to a lot of people, the sudden motivation to not feel physically like I'm a 45-year-old. I'll put it that way.
Yes. Well, actually, yes. And, it's nice to have something in you that motivates you, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. Everybody could do with having something inserted into them that gives them that get up and go that
Yeah,
they really need.
often I think I'm the man that can put something in you to get you to
Very much
run,
so. But
to run as
and
fast as possible.
we have often discussed this, whilst talking about what one can do in Vauxhall of an evening. We have discussed different ways of how people around here tend to motivate each other. And as you tell me, there are many very fit people here. So clearly they're very motivated, and they often
Yes.
encourage each other very forcefully, often, and into the
Because
small hours of the morning.
what people might not know is that you actually live in one of the most homosexual parts of not just London, the world.
I do.
Um,
Yes.
you actually do.
I feel
In
safe
fact,
here.
I had a tweet about you. Or let me just say what's coming up firstly, because we're going to be talking about Elon Musk and Labour and the very serious subject of grooming gangs. Maggie Oliver as well, the woman who should be a dame as far as I'm concerned for taking on the British establishment when it came to that. Hey, talking of those New Year's honours, Sir Sadiq Khan will be talking about that. We'll be talking about Meghan. I mean, she's titled, isn't she? And quite entitled. We'll be discussing the trailer to her new show. And we'll be talking about Ed Miliband's obsession with heat pumps. And apparently, there's going to be a new way of getting us to love heat pumps. So that's a lot for us to discuss as we put the world to rights. But Benedict, I got a tweet about you. So I put, hang on, I put out a tweet earlier to ask what we should be talking about, and someone says someone should ask Benedict, why does he look like the next door neighbour in a 1970s sitcom?
Well, I don't know. I don't watch many sitcoms from the 1970s. Can you name any of those? Was Our
Um,
Friends in the North in the 70s, or was that
no,
slightly
no,
later?
no. That there was like Love Thy Neighbour.
Eh,
There was George and Mildred. There was Bless This House. There was all of those sorts of things. And they all had a slightly, I think the theme is they all had a slightly sort of sexually deviant looking next door neighbour who was a little bit creepy and a little bit pervy.
Are you
Who,
sure that this is the neighbor that they were talking about? There might have been other neighbors. I
no,
mean,
I'm pretty sure that was the neighbour that they meant. The person who, if it was a sitcom based on the present day, they'd be on a list.
great. That's great to
So,
know.
congratulations on
Well, I
that.
look like a bit of a deviant, and I'm hiding in, the most sort of sexually liberal place in London. This, I think that suits me rather well. I
Hey,
think
well,
this is rather unfair. I was
talking of
compared to
loosening you up.
Top Cat the other day. Somebody said I look like Top Cat. I don't know what that is. Apparently, this is a good thing. Many people seem to think that it was a good thing. So,
Interesting,
yeah,
because I would
Top
never
Cat,
associate. I would never associate you in the word top. So that's
meow.
that's that's interesting. would. I would
We'll
have.
take
I
a
would have.
straw poll. We'll get people to write in and see what they think.
What? So basically, we're going to get people. We could do this on this channel. We're going to get
Yes.
people to write in and suggest if you were gay, whether you would be top or bottom. Is that what we're asking people to
Do you know
write
what?
in?
Why not? Why not? Because everything else is, frankly, rather depressing. I think that this is the levity, or indeed the serious sort of subject that I think the public needs to know. Do I look like your friendly neighborhood homosexual, or the slightly more dangerous one? I'm not sure
Yes.
which I prefer,
But also, more importantly, do you look like you would be the giver or receiver in a gay relationship? Would you be top or bottom? And actually, do you know what? I'm going to cancel that poll because we all know it would be bottom. Now, what are
100%.
we? What are we drinking today? Talking of loosening you up, so to speak. What
Yeah.
are you? What are you drinking today? You're having a drink of something.
I am. I'm drinking cider because I'm somebody from the countryside. And not just I'm not drinking like a can of Strongbow or something like that.
That
Look at
doesn't
this.
make you less. That doesn't make you less camp.
Look at this. Look at this. This little sort of artisan cider.
Ooh.
Little Pomona table cider. How exciting. It's very nice.
Little
It's going to put
what?
me straight to sleep.
Little what?
Little Pomona table cider.
Oh, I know him. I've met him. Definitely.
He's big on the scene as well.
Wasn't so little when I met him, but clearly things have changed. Okay, well I'm on the Grey Goose.
Good
Um,
lord. The whole thing. Neck it. Neck it.
um, no, but I always put drinks in a decanter. I would have thought with your level of breeding, actually, that's exactly something that you would have done.
No, I think that that's far too obvious. It's far too obvious if I were to get out a bottle of port or something. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what the audience would expect me to do. I have to give them a few surprises. This is my
Downstairs, I've got a tray, a silver tray with a decanter of vodka, decanter of gin, decanter of whiskey, decanter of brandy, and a decanter of amaretto. And we're about to purchase a small decanter for vermouth for dirty martinis as well.
Do you have silver glasses for your vodka?
No lead crystal though, lead
Okay.
crystal, which match
Apparently
the
you're supposed to
decanter.
drink them out of silver. Yeah.
The matches the decanter, the glasses. Can you see?
Yes.
So
And a
that's
silver
fine.
decanter would just be gauche. So
And I'm on the ginger ale with the vodka today.
you're really not. You're not doing dry January, are you?
Oh God, no! These are
No.
ridiculous.
I
I'm, I'm,
hear that
I'm
people do that. That they're not allowed to drink in January. I feel
I'm
bad
having the
for
wettest January going. My January is so wet I could slip off the chair as we speak.
that. Ooh, make sure. Heaven's sake.
Um,
This is
so yeah,
revenge for what I said to you on the radio the other day, isn't it?
what did you say to me on the radio the other day?
We were discussing how Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage were getting their members out and comparing their sizes on the table. Yeah. Yay, we've got him again. This is
And
to
that
do
you,
with a very serious story for those of you who didn't listen, which was the membership numbers argument between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch. For some context, that
and
wasn't
you
just
said,
me being rude for no reason.
I'm doing up my button now because I feel like I'm hanging out. But you're right. You're right. You did say that it was not appropriate for either of them to get their members out and try and brag, which
It was a really, really good way to start the year, wasn't it? Really optimistic.
um, I know. You're out Cristo-ing Cristo, so I have got to give you some
That's
credit
why
on
I'm
that
only the
one.
sixth favourite commentator. Cristo the dictator cannot stand a rival. I'm going to end up in a prison somewhere.
No one is more filthy than I am. Thank you. Hey, talking of filth, you know what I did today, Benedict? Oh,
Are we allowed to? Well, I suppose Ofcom isn't a problem here. Yeah, go on.
I did something in my bathroom which was unspeakable.
Oh, have you
It
been
really did.
regrouting your shower?
I practically needed a re-grouting, but I had, I tell you something, um, the, the, my U-bend has never been more blocked. And it was absolutely disgusting. You have no idea what I found in my U-bend in the bathroom today. And I was bent over attempting to sort of pull out with my fingers what I could from my U-bend. And I have to say, it was disgusting.
Was
What
it?
I found in there was disgusting. And and you see, it all started because I'd I mean I don't want to be vulgar because I mean heaven forfend,
Mm.
but
but you're going to plow
I
on ahead anyway.
no, no, but I'd noticed like a bit of a smell
Mm.
coming from the hole, and I was a bit like, what is that? Every time I ran the tap, I thought, what is that? And so then I tried to stick something, down there, some of the sort of liquid stuff to try and get rid of some of that smell. But it didn't go. And every time there was water run into the hole, it would start to smell.
The douching didn't work.
It did not work. So I was like, what is that? And then today I just, you know what? It was on a whim, but
Yeah.
I got out of bed today. I was still in my long johns when I did it actually. I was in my long johns and I thought, I'm not having this anymore. I'm not having it. I need to get to the bottom of what's going on. So I found myself bent over. I had to get my wrist at an angle that it has never been before. And I actually managed to pull out my U bend, and so that I could inspect it myself by hand. And then there was the bit beyond the U bend, which was of course still attached, and I had to take it all downstairs and pull out what was in my U bend and pull out what was left behind as well. And I found in my U bend three
Mm.
separate caps from various products, hair products and things like that, and a piece of metal from a plug hole, and it was clogging up everything. So no wonder my U bend was smelling.
That's very bizarre. Of all the things to find inserted in your U-band, I mean, one does find the strangest things. One hears, but
Well,
well, I mean, this is
hair,
exciting.
a
You've
hair
had some.
product.
You've had a crash course in do-it-yourself elbow deep plumbing. This is a great start. I think this is a very
Well,
practical start.
I had to use Viacal on my U bend, and I
Yeah,
was worried about it corroding, especially and getting Viacal on your skin is
yeah,
not a pleasant experience.
no.
But I thought I've got to put Viacal in my U bend now and really just give it a good go. So I put Viacal in one end and I put Mr. Muscle in the other, and I gave both a squeeze. And I thought if they meet in the middle, then hopefully we're going to make some progress here. And do you know what? Now my U bend has never been cleaner, Benedict. I
Yeah,
swear,
you got me. You got me. Go on.
it is absolutely, it is sparkling. I tell you, so if you, do you know what? I could bend you over in my bathroom, and
Yes.
I could have you. You could put your nose right
Mm.
to my U bend, and you would not smell a thing.
I'll have to come round and inspect it. I
I
think you
t-
should get several people to come round and line up and have a go at inspecting it. Frankly.
It's amazing. It's
Mm.
absolutely amazing. And I tell you, no word of a lie, that was the day that I had today. And then
Yeah.
having to put it all back together and everything like that, and then wondering whether I was going to have a leaky U bend at the end of
Mm.
it, and that would be terrible.
It would.
Um,
If word got round,
but
you'd be in a lot of trouble.
but it's all turned out okay. It's all turned out okay. And now you could run water through my U bend, and it's like a hospital sluice. It's just boom, it all goes. It's so nice. It is so nice, and it is so pleasant smelling. It is clean. It is beautiful.
Mm. Well,
So that was my day.
I'm very happy for you. That's a very productive day.
Mm.
I think, frankly, I couldn't hope to measure up to that sort of thing. I mean, has the
Oh,
internet frozen?
have we
It
lost?
appears
I
so.
think I think Benedict's frozen.
It has frozen. What's going
Oh,
on
are you
here?
back? Are you back now?
I can't. You're not
I don't
moving
know.
when
I
you
think you.
speak.
I think you. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you now. Yeah. Can you see me?
Oh, great! I think you were in. I think my U pen shocked you to the point where you'd actually had. I wasn't sure if you'd had some sort of illness.
I think the parental controls on my internet was listening to this and went, "You know what? Actually, you've had enough of this for the day."
Off come sticky little fingers ended up in my U bend.
A couple of hands are going to sort of come out from the computer and put them over my ears and go, "No, no, little Benny, no, you can't listen to this.
Let
Absolutely not.
let's
It's going to
hope
corrupt the youth."
let's hope those fingers hadn't been in my U bend.
Not
Wouldn't want
yet,
them in
but
your
there's still
ears.
time. The year is young.
Um, so anyway, let's talk about some of the stories of the week. Let's start with one that has that has just a bit shiny. So I'm just going to do that. Let's talk about one that is really I don't know what the word is. Staggering, baffling, amazing, wonderful, awful.
Meghan
Sir
Markle.
Sadiq Sir Sadiq Khan.
Ah, that one.
Do you know, I did
Yeah.
an can I just answer before I ask you to answer, and then I'll go and do it for you.
Go on.
Can I just tell you, I did 3 hours on the radio on New Year's Eve, right?
Mm,
And I thought I'm going to flip it on its head, come up with a reason why he deserves his knighthood, right? I thought
mm.
3 hours. Well, that's what someone got. Not one person could come up with a reason as to why he deserves it. Someone came up with the idea that because he's won 3 elections as the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. But
Yeah.
I think that being mayor of London is the prize that you get for those elections. So I'm not sure that deserves a knighthood. But what do you think? Are we being a bit nasty?
Well, we do hand out knighthoods to all sorts of politicians who have achieved very little in this day and age. So by that metric, he absolutely deserves one as a politician who has achieved very little. And done it very successfully on more occasions than the average politician. But you're right, beyond that, you're really struggling, other than, I suppose, to remind the nation just how much worse it could be. You could have Sadiq Khan prime minister in a hypothetical world, and that would actually, I suspect, be worse than what we currently have or what we've recently had. So, in many ways, acting as the sort of the nation's conscience and saying, "Well, now be careful because things can always get worse." Maybe that as the sort of morality tale. But again, I am really clutching at straws here because, and this isn't simply us being sort of pessimistic for the sake of it. For the sake of it, London is nowhere near the city that it was when he took over in terms of its ambition, its outlook, its energy. There is simply an endless stream of things that have got worse. Be it crime, be it transport, be it the housing situation. Honestly, it's really. I mean, for heaven's sake, the Wi Fi has just momentarily gone on this conversation. Now, we're both in London. We're in a very well connected part of London. This is not a new thing that your Wi Fi will occasionally just drop out. It is not a new thing, for instance, for your mobile phone signal to just disappear whilst you're walking down, I don't know, Regent Street or Piccadilly. It's not there. Why? Because the capacity isn't there. It hasn't been updated. Really basic things like that in a global city that is supposed to be sort of one of the engines of global capital. They can't get the phone signal to work. They can't get the buses or the tubes to work. They can't get the police to turn up at burglaries. What on earth are we doing knighting the person who oversees all of this?
Well, I'm inclined to agree. I did come to a couple of conclusions after doing a 3 hour show on it, though,
Hmm.
and they are as follows. I actually think he's a brilliant politician. I I can't stand him as mayor of London, but I've
Hmm.
got to give. I don't know whether it deserves a knighthood, but I've got to give credit where it's due. In as much, I can't stand him. Please don't think that I'm saying this because I'm a fan of his. I'm not. I think he's repellent. I think he's a repellent little runt. And for those people that think I might have got a letter wrong, you wouldn't be wrong. I really do. I think he's one of the most dishonest and awful politicians that we've ever had the misfortune to be saddled with. But that is almost how he is a brilliant politician, because what he is brilliant at doing is is okay. Let me put it this way: if I was mayor of London, right,
Hmm.
and crime was at the level that it was at, and I had been elected as mayor, I would, number one, day one, first hour, it would be how do we get knife crime and other crimes down? There is no other pressing problem. It's a really difficult problem to solve. How do I get robberies down? How do I get street crime down? How do I make London's streets safer so that people can go out and so that women feel more safe, right? And, women especially, but everyone does. And that would be my number one priority. And that's a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah.
And what he is brilliant at, and I've got to give him credit for this as much as I loathe it, is saying, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve a problem that's already getting better, which is clean air.
Hmm.
And engines have never been cleaner. And I implemented the ultra low emission zone, which was actually my predecessor's policy, which was the central London ultra low emission zone. But I'm going to keep doing that, and I'm going to keep solving that problem, and I'm going to bring in cycle lanes, which no one actually really asked for, other than specific lobby groups.
Yeah.
And so he's very good at solving problems that don't need solving, that divert attention away from the really big problems that are far more difficult to solve. So his legacy will be, in on paper, clean air. Now, of course, when you look at the statistics and you look at the facts, actually, the air has not cleaned up that much in the outer zones of the ultra low emission zone, where he claims he's had massive success. But that almost doesn't matter because he's managed to divert attention away long enough as away from the real problems that are more difficult to solve that are actually getting worse. And from a politics point of view, from a I'm a successful politician point of view, that is actually quite amazing that he's done that and that he gets away with that.
That he gets away with it, I think, is the key thing there.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning, though, that what he is up against is almost the definition of incompetence in terms of what the Conservatives have put up at the last couple of mayoral elections. Not necessarily just in terms of the candidates, but the sort of the operation behind that. The Conservatives, I think, just don't think London is winnable. And they don't think it's particularly winnable, partly because most of the sort of the white middle class people are incredibly liberal, and most of the people in the Conservative Party sort of only listen to those, and therefore they think, London's very liberal. But also because it's now increasing, I think it may even be on the cusp of, if not already, majority, ethnic minority. And what the Labour Party has done, not just in London but elsewhere, is pander to a sort of a balkanisation of politics, where they split people down ethnic lines, and they appeal to them on that basis, on the basis that, look, we are Labour, we're the party of the working man and the oppressed, and the Tories, they hate you because they're racists, so you should vote for us. And the Tories go along with that. They almost go, yeah, that sounds about right. When the reality is, most of these groups, if you sort of just take a breakdown of what their views are, and what their social views are, their religious views, their economic views, they tend to be surprisingly right-wing. And why shouldn't they be? They come from more conservative cultures, in large part. And the very fact that they're moving to a sort of, one of the behemoths of capitalism sort of shows that they are often the sorts of people who like the idea of striving and working hard. The Tories are unable to see that and are unable to pick candidates who would appeal to those kind of people, even though in reality, London should be in play for the Conservatives.
And let's not forget, actually, Sean Bailey did far better than anyone expected.
Yeah.
But Susan Hall sadly didn't. And I actually quite liked Susan Hall, but I don't think that she was probably strong enough and had the party enough behind her. But I think I take your point about ethnicity, but I also think there's a class and wealth issue here in London, in as much as London is incredibly divided into either, I think, quite affluent in comparison to the rest of the country. Probably not affluent as in loads of money to throw around, because obviously London's so expensive, and also extremely poor. And that's always been, in my mind, I don't know whether you'd agree or disagree, the attraction of people on the left in politics, because I think that the ideology of higher taxes and labour has always been appealing to either those people who are liberal and have a bit of wealth, that say, well, actually, we can afford to pay more and we want to, and we have faith in the government and we're right on, we're Emma Thompson, we're all of these sorts of people, or we're very, very poor and we'll benefit from that ideology. I don't know if there's a lot of the middle in London, and I think that actually that middle is the Conservatives' really safe ground.
Well, I think there is a lot of the middle, but I think a lot of that middle is still in the age bracket that tends to vote leftwards. I don't think it, and partly the issue with this is because even though they are earning more on average than the average person in the country, they're not earning enough to get on the housing ladder or settle down and start having children. So they're not becoming the little conservative units that once upon a time people were expected to.
Well, you're not a capitalist if you don't have capital.
Yes, but well, exactly, and I think London is fantastic at sucking capital away from young people very quickly. Well, I mean, what is it now? The average person's wage, over half of it goes on their rent. How on earth are they ever going to save up to get a deposit if that's the case?
But then that's what I don't understand, though, because Sadiq Khan, again, his whole thing is. I like to think of myself as pretty middle, and like I'm probably centre right in my politics, but I try and be as balanced as possible. I try and give everyone a fair hearing. But his whole thing, so I say this advisedly, but how can they be attracted to a man whose whole raison d'être, whole policy platform is about immigration and diversity when they don't realise that that's actually probably a massive part of why their rents are so high. And that's immigration policy. That's the
Yeah.
very immigration policy that if Sadiq Khan went any further, he would support. He would support that, but that's the very thing, not immigrants, immigration policy that is meaning that there is a shortage of housing, which is of course putting rents up. So again, I tip my hat to his politics, his ability as a politician to deflect away from that. And going back to your point about we should be grateful we don't have Prime Minister Khan, I absolutely agree, but we never will. And I'll
No.
tell you why, because the other brilliant thing he's good at is he does not accept or take kindly to any sort of criticism or any sort of interview or anything like that, that puts him under any sort of pressure whatsoever. He chooses his media outlets very, very carefully.
Yeah.
He would not be able to do that if he was trying to be a prime minister or a member of the cabinet. So I wonder if this is a bit of a consolation prize to him. And Keir Starmer going, look, you're going to be a Sir. You probably end up in the House of Lords. You ain't going anywhere else. And I don't know
Yeah.
if Sadiq Khan wants to go anywhere else because he'd have scrutiny.
Well,
And
it's ironic.
scrutiny is something he avoids like the plague.
It is ironic because I think most people recognise that he only decided to try and become Mayor of London because he saw what it did for Boris Johnson's profile. It was sort of able to elevate him into being spoken about as a prospective Prime Minister. And it's not just him. That's why Andy Burnham became the Mayor of Greater Manchester as well,
Yeah.
because they both thought, being a Mayor of a greater, a metro area is a fantastic thing. It hasn't quite worked out for either of them. But, I mean, just to go back to that topic of the failure of the breakthrough of understanding what the effects of immigration can be, it's one of the really sort of draining aspects of the argument about it because it's sort of always been couched in terms of, well, of course, immigration is good for us because diversity is good for us. And people go, yes, more food, different ways of thinking. Yes, this can only be a good thing. And people just sort of stop at that and they don't start to think beyond it. And then they think in terms of the economy. Yes, more people, making more things, doing more things. Of course, this expands the size of the economy. They don't stop to think about wage suppression or competition. But why should they be doing that? Actually, this isn't necessarily. They're not economists. They're not not necessarily studied these things. And it's only when they find themselves in the thick of it, being out competed, being squeezed, that they begin to think to themselves, "Well, hang on, this doesn't feel right." But their entire worldview is couched around the idea that tolerance and immigration and all of these things are perfectly normal and that you can't criticize them. So they find themselves
But
a bit
also
stuck.
actually where they have a valid point is that the infrastructure and actually the perfect storm of austerity and those things have never caught up
Yeah,
with the amount of so that's almost the perfect get out. That's
yeah,
almost the perfect fall guy for immigration because you've got two issues with immigration. You've got the infrastructure issue,
mm,
and of course, no amount of statistics on GDP will reassure someone who can't get a doctor's appointment.
mm.
GDP to per capita has never gone up, and you've got the cultural issues. And weirdly, we've become a nation where it's acceptable to say almost you're not British, and um, it's this weird juxtaposition. I was talking to my
Well,
partner about this today, actually.
yeah,
And actually, I was talking about grooming gangs, weirdly. And he made a really good point to me. My partner is Syrian, and he made a really good point to me in as much as, on the one hand, we say to people, look, you've got to have British values and you've got to act in a British way and you've got to abide by the British rule of law and you've got to do all of these things. And if you don't, you're not British.
mm,
But then on the other hand, we say to people, but you are British, and if you come here, you should be British,
mm,
and so it's sort of like, what do we want? Like, for instance, there was a really interesting caller on LBC with David Lammy a couple of months ago that said to David Lammy, "You're not British.
mm,
You're not British. Just because you're British by nationality, that doesn't make you a British person by descent. So stop
mm,
saying you're British, you're not." And I
mm.
sort of understand that point of view, but also we want people to be British in their outlook. So we do give this slightly contradictory view. Do you think?
The difficult thing with David Lammy is he has in the past spoken about how he views himself actually as somebody of Caribbean, as much Caribbean as British, I think, and has spoken about the need for justice for Caribbean nations and that sort of thing, and has almost sort of couched himself, if you like, as a sort of a representative from that part of the world to the British government on this issue. Now, he may have changed his view on this. He may have simply been pandering to the gallery at the time. Lots of politicians do this sort of thing. But I think the idea of dual nationality, dual heritage, and a dual vision of what you are is a curious one that doesn't really get spoken about in this country for the simple reason that people don't want to give offence. They don't want to appear to be rude. And I can understand why that is. Some people might get very upset about that, especially if they've come all the way here and they've worked very hard and they've taken a citizenship test and actually all their values do align. But of course, there's still going to be that sort of link to your homeland as well. You can't just cut that off and pretend that it never existed. So
So what's the balance, and what do we, as British
yeah,
people, and again I say this as British people, I'm British Greek actually.
yeah,
I'm Greek in descent, but I always say to myself I'm British Greek. I'm not Greek British.
you're
I'm
as
British
British as
Greek.
Prince Philip.
Thank you very much indeed, and nearly as Randy. But what is it that we actually sort of want from people? And I tell you, what, we were talking about it. This takes us on really nicely in the context of the grooming gangs.
Mm-mm.
And I was saying to my partner, and it's probably the most right wing I've been in ages when having a conversation with my partner, because I was talking about all the things that were happening. He wasn't actually disagreeing with me on this, but we were talking about all the things that have been happening and Elon Musk interfering. Because he said, "Oh, what do you think about Elon Musk interfering?" And I said, "Well, he is interfering, but the problem is he's right.
Yeah, yeah,
In as much as this grooming gang scandal is absolutely horrific. Jess
yeah,
Phillips now claiming that she doesn't want any kind of sort of inquiry when she was on the sidelines saying that she did is abhorrent. But
yeah,
also it goes to a far deeper problem, in as much as that if you are, I don't care if you're born here. I
mm-mm.
don't care if you're born here. If your culture, if your outlook on life as a Pakistani Muslim,
Mm.
which is the vast majority of people who are involved in this grooming gang scandal in multiple cities across the United Kingdom, which Elon Musk has shone a light on quite admirably, then I said, oh, I'm sick of us importing this. I'm sick of us importing this outlook. If this was anyone else, if this was a group of white men who had been targeting young Pakistani Muslim girls, there would be outcry about it.
Yeah,
But why are we so scared? Going back to your point about us being very scared about talking about people's
mm.
culture and their background and stuff, to have called this out, to have investigated it, to have spoken about this for so long,
Yeah,
that we have imported this problem. We have allowed this to go on with impunity, but we've also imported female genital mutilation. We've imported Sharia courts. We've imported all of these things. And actually, that's why it has been the domain of Tommy Robinson and those sorts of people.
yeah,
Because, of course, moderate people have not spoken out enough. Now, and I'll let you respond in a second, but I was one of the team at ITV. I don't know if you saw my tweet about this. I put Sammy Woodhouse and other victims on daytime television on Loose Women in 2016 and 2017. I put Maggie Oliver on Loose Women 2016, 2017. I was part of a team that did it. It wasn't just me, but I was part of a team that did that because I felt this was daytime TV. We've got to tell people about this. I've spoken about it on my show multiple times, and I've done it carefully. I've done it pointing out that not all Pakistani Muslims are paedophiles. Of course, it would be ridiculous to say that, but there are parts of the country where there is a very high propensity for Pakistani Muslim men to be doing this, and it's people like me that need to be talking about this, because otherwise it will be the far right, and it will be people who have perhaps not your best interests at heart that you will be attracted to.
mm.
And it's still going on, and it's still not being spoken about, and still we are shutting down these conversations. Still we have a politician who is now in a position of power, Jess Phillips, who is saying that we're not going to have an inquiry from the council that wants the inquiry. I
Yeah.
just can't get my head around it, Benedict.
I mean, just on the subject of Jess Phillips, I don't know if you remember, at the general election, she was heckled as she retained her seat very narrowly by a group of Asian men who were accusing her of rigging the ballots and all sorts of things, because she faced an insurgency in Birmingham Yardley over the war in Gaza, because of course this became a huge thing where actually people were voting en masse for candidates based purely on their stance on a foreign war. A foreign war, it must be said, not even to do with the ethnicity of the people voting in this country. The average Pakistani has not been to the Middle East and will never go.
So is that what she's thinking about? Is that
I
her?
don't know if it is for certain, but I think we have to bear in mind that that plays a part. That actually, and it's not just her, there are lots of Labour MPs that I think feel very awkward about this because they have very large communities, ethnic minority communities, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, increasingly Afghan communities in their constituencies that they do have to deal with and that they feel that they don't necessarily have the best handle on. Now, just to talk about what we're talking about here, of course, is culture that's been imported, behaviours that have been imported, and how that comes up against British culture. And it is unfortunate that British culture is, where possible, despite what The Guardian would tell you about us all being horrific racists, actually we are an incredibly tolerant society. We tolerate all sorts of things that the average society would not tolerate at all. We're very welcoming. I'd actually say we're rather foolhardy in some ways because the average person who is very sort of pro-refugee, pro-migration, all this, that, the other, doesn't actually know the first thing about Pakistani or Ukrainian or Somali or Polish culture, and also doesn't care to know, frankly. They just assume that if you turn up in Bromsgrove, that within 6 weeks you'll be as British as cricket. Yeah, and it's an incredibly unfortunate thing that this trusting nature, that in some ways was part of what allowed us to sort of spread all over the world and do very well out of it, because we were able to sort of interact with different cultures very easily, is now being weaponized against people in that they are not allowed to speak up or feel that they can't speak up about these things because it would be rude to do so. What I have to say on the subject of the grooming gangs, a lot of this, as you say, was swept under the carpet. It was not talked about because of a need for community relations. They didn't want to stir tensions, they didn't want to embolden the far right. And I'm sorry, but in the great hierarchy of crimes that you can commit, on an evolutionary scale, the mass rape and torture of children is about as big a red line as I can imagine. That's one of those things where you kind of go, I don't care about community tensions or relations. If this is happening, we have to put a stop to this before we consider community relations.
But
This
also,
is the red line that you
sorry to jump
don't
in. Are
want
you
people doing.
thick? Are these people thick? Because we don't want to embolden the far right by shining a light on it.
Yeah.
So we'll embolden the far right by not shining a light
Well,
on it because that's all they
yeah,
did.
this is the thing. Abuse of children, the most vulnerable in society, is the great big red flag at which you go, no, I'm sorry, prison, deportation, whatever it is, whatever the punishment is for the individual, you're going to get it in the neck. And you also have to, as you're sort of saying, emboldening the far right, how do we expect these people to ever become British if they are allowed to behave in a way and think that this is acceptable? And again, I'll use that word, balkanize themselves, ghettoize themselves, set them up in sort of, separate communities within community. You go to places like Bradford or Oldham, Bradford in particular, great swathes of it are mono-ethnic cultures now because of mass migration, and they really do have a problem in terms of assimilating with white communities and vice versa, because there's not really been any attempt to sort of massively integrate them or make them British. It's just been assumed that it'll magically happen overnight. That's not fair to the local people who are already there. It's also frankly not fair to members of that community who are coming here, just to be dropped in this place and told, well, off you go. We assume it'll all be fine, right? You're not going
And
to
also,
take your life.
can I make another point as well, which is important to make when we have responsible conversations about this? It is not fair to those Pakistani Muslims who are as
Exactly.
outraged about this as others,
Mm.
because they're now being tarred with this brush. There are Pakistani Muslims, there are Muslims in this country who are outraged by female genital mutilation,
Yeah.
that are outraged by terror attacks,
Mm.
that are outraged by grooming gangs, that are outraged by, and I don't know how many of these category, but again, if I wanted to hold up write a cartoon on here of any other ethnicity, of any other religion,
Mm.
to show a parody of a particular god, I couldn't do it if it was Muhammad because I would fear for my life. How have we? And there are many people who are of the Islamic faith who wouldn't give two hoots about
Mm.
that, but there are many who would probably want to kill me if I did that. How have we ended up And I don't know, am I far right by saying this? I don't know, but how have we ended up importing these values and tolerating the fact that there are certain things that would be considered blasphemy that I know I can't say because I would fear for my life. There are certain practices that I know are wrong on
Mm.
a human level that we have tolerated, and
Yeah.
I don't know how we got here. And I think we got here from a kind place. And I think we're doing the
Yeah.
people who are in those cultures. And another thing that's worth pointing out, Nazir Afzal, who was a Muslim police chief, was the one that actually came in and said, look, you need to investigate Rochdale. It took a Muslim police chief to come in and do that. And again, that isn't spoken about enough. So I'm not going to I'm not going to be seduced by saying every single Muslim thinks this way,
Of
because a
course
lot
not.
of people will say that, and it's wrong to say that, and those people are being done a disservice. But as me, as a gay man, as a Greek British man, you as a white straight man, if there was someone within my caste, within
Yeah.
my culture, within my minority, whatever it might be, within my category, who was
Mm.
committing terrible crimes, I would want to call out those crimes, and I would want to have those crimes investigated so I didn't end up associated with them.
Yeah, of course. You can't expect people to be able to assimilate and move on if they aren't helped along the way. And actually, if people are breaking the law, it shouldn't be hushed up because, as you say, it will end up in a backlash on the entirety of the community. But even using that word is a bit of a problem. Pakistani community, which I know we've done because it makes it easier. But Pakistan isn't really one country. That's something again that the average person, the average person who's sort of very pro migration and goes, "Oh yes, we love diversity," they couldn't tell you the different ethnic groups in Pakistan. They couldn't tell you the different, effectively, nations that make up Pakistan. They couldn't tell you that one group in particular is massively overrepresented in cases of grooming scandals in this country and rape scandals. One group in Pakistani society massively overrepresented over the others. So how do the others feel? If you're a Balochi or a Pashto, how do you feel about the behavior of people from Kashmir who come to this country and are, as I say, overly represented in that? When you are then tarred with the same brush, when you're back
That's
in Pakistan, you don't
so
necessarily
interesting, Benedict.
associate with those people.
Oh, Benedict, you're so good. That's so interesting. 'Cause I don't know
Mm.
about that. You're right. I don't know about that at all. I don't, and I wonder as well. And again, look, I'm not someone who's going to sit here and heap praise on Tommy Robinson, because I think he's done things that are wrong and
Yeah,
damaging to the cause. But I think that what I will say is I wonder if people like him. They don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the language, they don't have the nuance, they don't have the ability to point out what you just have in order to make their point, which is why it's very easy to just say, I don't know if he's a racist or not. I've no idea. I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is he has, when interviewed, sort of tarred every single Muslim with the same brush and talked
yeah.
about Islam itself being a problem.
Mm.
And I think that when you talk in those broad strokes, you leave yourself open to accusations that you are being prejudiced against the entire group. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know whether he is, or I don't know whether, again, it's a class thing or an education thing that means that perhaps he's not got the words. It's what we saw with the riots as well. People who are perhaps articulating themselves in a completely wrong and abhorrent way, but for
Mm.
years they've tried to articulate themselves in a way that people would understand. They've been accused of being racist.
Mm.
I think that there's an awful lot of perhaps middle class snobbery about the way in which people have tried to talk about this, and we end up having a go at the way they're saying it rather than taking on board what they're trying to say.
Well, I think that's entirely right. And people don't necessarily have the bandwidth to be sort of getting themselves up to date on all the terminology and all the information. People lead busy lives, but they know what it is that they don't like. They know what they disagree with. And on, as I say, an evolutionary level, a lot of those people understand that the rape and grooming of children is a fundamentally wicked thing. And even if they can't necessarily articulate why it is or who it is or anything like that, that doesn't mean that those emotions are wrong.
Well, we're
Now,
seeing it now.
yeah,
Sorry, Ben. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it now on X when people are saying on X, yes, but. Sorry, I nearly knocked over my vodka. But I'm sorry, this makes me so angry because I've spoken about this
yeah,
for so many years and no one seems to listen. And in fact, just to say, I think Maggie Oliver's going to come on maybe next week, or in the next week or two, to come on one of these and talk to me, because I've
mm,
had a relationship with her for probably 8 years now. talking about this, but it's happening now on X, where people went since it's been highlighted by Elon Musk. People are saying, well, but white men are far more likely to be groomers or in a grooming gang, and so you're being racist.
Yeah,
And
and
of course, but we're a majority, right? It's not about who has the most groomers. It's about the
yeah,
proportion within a community that
yeah,
has. So if you have a 80% white country, and
mm,
there is a larger proportion of that number, a large proportion of that number in there, but you have a 10% Muslim population, and there's a larger proportion in there. It's about proportions, not about numbers. But it's happening right now that people are shutting it down and saying it for that reason, Benedict.
yeah. Of course. I mean, that whole thing about, oh well, the majority of people that do it are white men. I mean, it's the most disingenuous thing, and you know exactly what it is that they're doing, and you know why they're doing it, because they don't want to have the conversation. Because again, those are the sorts of people for whom race relations and community relations are more important than actually children being raped. They don't
But
care
why would
about
you not want to have the conversation? Why?
well, this is the
Why?
thing. Those people don't care about people being molested or raped by white men either, because they don't talk about it. It's not important to them. They only raise it when the subject of ethnic minority people doing it becomes important. At which point they weaponize children being abused, and this is what it goes back to for me, and for so many of those other people who you're talking about. Some of whom can articulate it, some of them can't. Some of them feel silenced. Some of them feel now empowered to do so, and that is the underlying principle that children are the most vulnerable people in society. Society has a role and a duty, and the state has a duty to protect them. And so many of them have just been thrown to the wolves because people didn't want to appear. Let's not even bother saying racist. They didn't want to appear to be difficult. They didn't want to appear to be rude. They didn't want to ask the probing questions. Beyond getting to the stage of being accused of being racist, they didn't want to kick up a fuss. They just wanted to be polite, and in that very well-meaning way, they lost sight of a fundamental
We're screwed.
human understanding. I think.
We're screwed. We're
Yeah, probably.
screwed. What has gone wrong that this can be allowed to happen? I just those girls, those poor girls.
Hmm.
It's a race hate crime. It is a race hate crime, and it doesn't again get spoken about in that context either. Hate crimes are when you commit a crime that is based not just on the crime itself, but on the targeting of someone based on their
Yeah.
ethnicity or sexual orientation or something like that. And that's exactly what this is. That they're targeted because they're white.
I can't remember who it was that said it, Ross Douthat or somebody like that, who said, if you can pinpoint what's most important to a society, you'll be able to work out who can get away with rape. And that's as true for Catholic Ireland in the 60s and the 70s as it is today. Once upon a time in that part of the world, the Roman Catholic Church was the most important thing. So, of course, it was the Roman Catholic Church where we had the massive abuse scandals, the abuse of power, children being raped. In this country now, it is diversity, whatever that means. And that means if you come from a certain background, I'm not saying you can get away with it, I'm saying that if it happens on a certain scale, there are protections, not because the state goes into action stations and goes, we have to protect these people, but because there is this sort of sotto voce understanding that, ooh, this might not be very good, but you know what we don't like? White ethno-nationalism, the far right, because what we want is diversity, and you can't upset diversity.
I honestly, I can't bear it any longer, and I don't know what we're becoming, and it's becoming really frustrating
I
and saddening and infuriating, and it's got to be spoken about more and
I
solved
do,
because it's going on now. By the way, these grooming
yeah.
gangs are continuing. It is going on now in many of our major cities. It is happening
Mm.
now today. But it's not just grooming gangs. Like I said, it is sort of covert blasphemy laws.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is female genital mutilation. It is
It's cousin
um,
marriage.
cousin
Which is
marriage that
something
is
that just
leading.
isn't, which hasn't been spoken about because we never thought for one second we would have to actually say it out loud. That you
I'm having
shouldn't,
another drink, Benedict. By the way, I can't. I really
by
am.
all means. But the fact that we have cousin marriage on the scale that we do in this country, in this day and age, once upon a time, when this country was a lot more religious, you would have parish registers specifically to stop people from doing it accidentally because it was understood it was a bad thing. And this was 1,000 years ago. We understood marrying your cousin has adverse effects down the line for your children. Why it is that we have allowed people to come in from a culture, and again, largely certain ethnic groups in Pakistan, India as well, certain sub-Saharan African groups as well, but who think that this is acceptable. And when you look at the breakdown of the amount of strain that they put on the health service because they produce a disproportionately high number of people with physical and mental
Yes.
defects. And we are now having to have the start of that conversation where we say, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do this, not just because it harms your children, as it will, but because it puts a strain on the rest of society as well. Why should we have to put up with this fundamentally incredibly backwards practice in what is supposed to be a progressive and outward looking country? But I bet you, when we have those debates in Parliament, people will try to shut it down by saying that
Well,
it's
they have. When it's been debated in Parliament, it has been shut down. It has been shut down by people saying that it is, it's a cultural practice. It's a practice. Why would you want a practice that harms your potential, your
well,
children that you might have? I don't. I feel like we're getting very, very lost, and I'm scared because I'm scared that we're getting lost, but also I'm a selfish bugger, Benedict. I am, and I'm scared that people like me and people like you, who are pretty moderate, I think we're
hmm.
pretty balanced. I think we do accept there are other ways of thinking. I'm worried we're far right in the eyes of people.
Well,
I know I am. You laugh,
yeah,
but
no, almost certainly we are. In the eyes of many people, we probably are increasingly. But don't worry, I think the Overton window is shifting on this. I don't think we are going to be seen that way for very long. And I think that we have, even though he has gone off at a hell of a tangent, I think that the attention that's been brought to this by people like Elon Musk is going to mean that this can't be avoided. Because when you have somebody who is going to be part, albeit rather distantly, part of the incoming US administration with the ear of the President of the United States, if he's going to be talking about this on loudspeaker all the time, you're not going to be able to get away with it. But I mean, it's interesting. You couch this in the terms of how have we got here? We're talking about people saying that this is fine because it's a cultural practice, and I can't remember which Indian governor it was. It was Curzon or somebody else who, when the British outlawed the practice of suti, which is when you set fire to a widow, you throw her on the funeral pyre of her husband so that she doesn't become a burden. The British outlawed it, and of course, many people were up in arms all across India, and they went to the governor and they said, "We want you to allow us to throw the widows onto the pyres. It is our custom to do so." To which the British governor said, "Well, that may be your custom, but in our country we have a custom which is when a man sets a woman on fire, we put a rope around his neck and hang it. We're in charge, and we'll enforce our custom if you enforce yours." I'm not saying, obviously, we want to start hanging people, but a little bit more muscular response from the state to people who are putting these practices in place, I think, would be a welcome development.
I absolutely agree. But also as well, where are some of the groups like the Muslim Council of Britain who have become strangely this sort of odd? They were better. They never used to be like it. I remember
Oh,
years ago they used to
Cristo,
condemn,
if it's not to do with Gaza, they don't care. If it's an
but
Israeli doing it, they care. That's the thing.
but they didn't used to be like that.
Mm.
They didn't. I remember a caller when I did a show on LBC once ringing up saying that all Muslims were terrorists, and I was able to point out to him, actually, no, there. Look, this is a terror attack that the Muslim Council of Britain condemned. So don't say that. That's really wrong that you say that.
Well,
And
of course,
but they don't do that anymore so much, really, do they?
I mean, it's one of the amusing things. I say it's
They've
amusing.
changed.
It's not brilliant because I'm talking about human rights abuses here. But people often sort of complain about the human rights abuses of certain Gulf states and Arab states, be it Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or whoever it is. They don't always treat people particularly well. Amongst the worst people that amongst the people that they treat the worst are Islamist terrorists. That's one of the sort of the bizarre thing. Actually, the people who really get it in the neck are the same people who are committing terrorist atrocities here. Same organisation, same background, same ideology. If you go to a place like Egypt, I mean, this is part of the reason why, if there was an inquiry into what's going on in Gaza and the international community found definitively that there was a genocide happening in Gaza, it wouldn't just be Israel that would be a party to it. Egypt would be as well, because Egypt hasn't opened the border at Rafah. Why haven't they done that? Because Egypt has been fighting an insurgency in the Sinai against the same people who run Gaza for the last few years and treating them appallingly badly. Because actually, that's how often it is. There is as much a problem within different Muslim countries and different Muslim communities against extremism as there is in the West as well. Look at what's happening to Syria right now. It's being fought over by various different extremist organizations. They're not all backed by every member of the population. That's why half of the country's fled overseas, because they don't want to live under those sort of circumstances. So it isn't helpful to tar people with that sort of brush. It isn't helpful, as I talked about earlier with Pakistan, to sort of assume that everybody's part of the same group or the same tribe or they all believe the same things. But for as long as we, in this country, white middle class people, turn a blind eye to a minority who are taking things to a horrific extreme, and we turn a blind eye to it on the basis that can't inflame community tensions, you will end up inflaming the tensions and you'll make it worse for everybody who came here and just tried to live their lives and live within the law.
We're going to be hoisted by our own petard. We're going to be hoisted. We're going to be out tolerated by our own tolerance, and it's really really scary. Okay, we're not going to talk about heat pumps. We haven't got time, but we will talk about Meghan Markle because we're very very tolerant of her. Did you watch her trailer?
I did.
And I'm going to put it on.
Go
Oh,
on.
oh, I muted it. Did you hear it then?
No, I didn't. You muted it.
I muted it. There she is. She's always loved taking something ordinary and elevating it. Here she is. She's pouring some olive oil on some hummus, and she's icing a cake, and she's invented cooking.
It's very Nigella Lawson.
Has invented cookery, and of course, that isn't her house. That isn't her kitchen. That's nothing actually to do with her at all. And now she's gone back on Instagram. So, I mean, has she just basically become like some sort of cheap, Towie-esque influencer?
Honestly, there is such a vacuosity to those two, and it's very tragic in many ways. In that they really did have an opportunity to make something of themselves, to be people, which is what they wanted to be. Had they gone to Canada or Australia, and Harry had spent his time, working with veterans or conservation, and Meghan had done the sort of the Princess Diana route and worked with orphans or whatever it was, they could have been international stars. They would have been respected. They would have been loved. What they instead tried to do was be Hollywood A-listers, and there's nothing really very interesting about them. All they had was the stories about other people to sell, and after a while, those ran out. And I think actually you see this in this advert for this new Netflix show. I joked that it's very sort of a bit like Nigella Lawson, but it isn't. There's none of the sort of there's none of the appeal, there's none of the character actually to Meghan Markle doing that. Whereas if Nigella does something similar like that, it, if you like, oozes out of the television. Meghan Markle does it, and you just go, what are you doing? This is incredibly
That's
dull.
because Nigella has the credibility
Mm.
and the gravitas, whereas you sort of feel like okay, I've done, and we're going to put it on YouTube, and I'm actually deciding. I think we're going to do it this January. I've done 6 episodes of a cookery show with my mother. Right,
Right.
done it for fun. Done it because I like Greek cookery. She likes Greek cookery, and we nearly got a pilot once. We did get a pilot once for a TV channel, and we did it for fun.
Yeah.
And my mum is the Greek cook. I'm just kind of the assistant, and it's fun.
The taste
That's
test.
why we've done it. All right.
Yeah.
Um, and I've done it as a little sideline thing. I've done it as a little. Whereas she's done it because she's running out of options. She's running out of things. And what else could she do? She tried to be a sort of philanthropist and no one cared. Then she tried to talk about the internet and the terrible people on there, which again, very worthy cause. When she was saying about all of these, people whose children were damaged by the internet and killed themselves and all this sort of stuff, which is absolutely dreadful. However, some of Meghan Markle's fans are some of the most repellent people on the internet. Some of Meghan's fans have been so awful towards Princess Catherine, accusing her of faking her cancer and all this sort of things, that her credibility there is slightly shot. Now, it's cookery. Next week, God knows what it'll be. Will she be a fashion designer? The week after, I don't know. Maybe
Origami.
she'll be fiddling with my U-bend and she'll be a plumber. I don't know. Like it's just now I feel like it's this sort of scattergun
Hmm.
approach. Do you think people will want to see my cookery show? By the way, Benedict?
I would I would watch that as the thing. That
Thank
sounds
you.
very entertaining.
But
Much more
what do you think? And do leave it in the comments if you want to see it, because I'm really thinking about dropping it on YouTube. We did it about a year
really
ago.
get a pilot. That's cool.
That was it. And we got the pilot years ago. Channel 4 gave me and my mum a pilot for a cookery show years
Yeah.
ago. It never went anywhere. They paid for the pilot, and it sort of never ended up going anywhere. And so yeah, that was how
It's
it
a
came about.
shame because Greek food is. I mean, it's much sort of underrated actually as a sort of the cuisine. It stands alongside Italian and French quite easily, but it often sort of gets overlooked. I could imagine that would have been quite good. You know, did you
Well,
ever see,
we've
did you
done
ever see
6
the Two
episodes.
Greedy Italians and they did the sort of the trip around Italy? You could have
We've
done that
called it
around Greece.
we've called it Big Fat Greek Cookery,
There you go. It
and
writes itself. This stuff.
we've done. What did we do? I'm trying to think what we made because we did it quite a few months ago, but I've had it sort of in the can since then. We did keftedes.
Yeah.
We did tzatziki. We did a couple of dishes. We did lovely chicken, just like lovely lemon and herb chicken. We did moussaka,
Mm.
not moussaka, moussaka. We did what else did we do? Oh, we did orzo. We did some orzo, an
Oh,
orzo dish. We did quite a few dishes. We did like six episodes, but different, lots of different. Oh, baked feta. We did quite a few of them. So you should come round for a baked feta or an orzo sometimes, Benedict.
oh, and I'm worried what'll happen if I go into the bathroom and I have a close encounter with the U-bend. You know,
I,
that's the.
would- I, do you know what? I tell you something. If I ever came to yours, I would like to get my fingers in your U-bend.
Oh, I bet you would. Not many people have. It's a bit of a
I
fetish.
really, I bet you. I bet you. I don't know what I'd find up there. How long has it been since you cleared out your U-bend?
Oh, many, many years. It's like being back at school.
Seriously, because you've gone into your new place now and you've never even given your U-bend any attention since you've been in
Not
there, have
given
you? I
it.
bet.
I've not never given it a thorough going over. No, but yeah, there's plenty of time, and you are now an expert on this. So
Do you know what? It's something I think about a lot, Benedict, more than
is
I
it?
probably should.
Yeah, I'm surprised I'm not higher than six on your list. Frankly, I assume all the others have had the U-bend treatment.
Well, give me access to your U-bend. You might make fifth.
There we go. This is how you make it in the world. If you want to be a star, you got to do something.
But do you think that she lacks credibility? Is my final question on
Of
Meghan.
course she does. She's somebody who's famous, not in fact because she was on TV, because of who she married, and who she married was a spare. And
She's a feminist. She's a feminist, Benedict.
yeah, great, sure you are, Megan. Whoop de doo. I mean, look, I don't want to sort of bring it back to the sort of the misery of some of what we've been talking about, but there are a lot of feminist heroes talking up for the people who have been abused in the UK over the last couple of years, the last couple of decades, frankly. Young women and girls, many of whom are now women, who I think do a lot more for the name of feminism than a very rich woman who became even richer and just wanted to be on TV. I mean, maybe that's feminism, but I don't think it's something that I particularly find particularly noble. Put it that way.
And on that note, we're going to end it there, Benedict.
We are.
It's been beautiful.
It has. It's been emotional.
It's been lovely. I will. If I was with you now, I'd hold you.
It would be a very, I think, fitting end as it fades out into black. And the two
I
of
would
us.
hold your fitting end.
Yeah, you would. Fits very neatly.
It does. It does. I just sometimes think about holding you.
Yeah.
Do you
Is
ever think
it
about holding me?
often? It rocks me to sleep at night.
Does what does your partner say
Usually,
when you're
usually
rocking?
because I have to wake up at 4 a.m. the next morning to try to get to the radio with you.
Sometimes, sometimes when you come in onto my show, when you used to, you would look a right state.
Yeah, well, I'm not a morning person. I'll
You're
be
not.
honest. I'm not.
You're not, are you?
No. And yet I do it for you, Cristo. I do it
Oh,
for you.
well, the fact that I can get you up first thing
It's
is
testament to your willpower and your
it's
tenacity.
something I cherish,
Yes. It'll
and
take you.
I always will.
Good. You should.
And on that note, will you come on again?
Absolutely. As and when you want me and you can't find somebody better.
Yeah, and those are the criteria.
Pretty much.
Quite right. Thank you, Benedict. Do like and subscribe. As always, look below, like what you're hearing, subscribe to what you're hearing, and do spread the word as well. And comment as well. I've been terrible. Someone pointed out the other day that I never reply to any comments, and I don't, and I should. I should actually go onto the comments and start answering back to people. And I'm so sorry I haven't, and I will, because I've been really, really bad. And also, do you think I should release these as audio podcasts? Maybe I should. I don't know. Someone else suggested that. I'm really rubbish at this stuff, and I'm really trying, and help me, and I'm just drunk.
I think you should release them as audio. There's not been any visual gags Not this week, anyway. I mean, have they been in the past? I don't know. It's
Benedict, you are my visual gag.
Oh, there we go. I mean, yeah, that's true. You couldn't have done the whole bit at the start saying, "Does he look like your creepy '70s neighbor next door?" People will be going, "Well, I don't know. He sounds a bit suspicious, but I can't go on that."
You're like an extra from on the buses.
Absolutely, and people won't be able to see your toy car behind you.
Yes, do you like my toy car behind me? This is a Mercedes 280 CE that's behind
Yes,
me. And you're right. Before we started, I moved it and it fell on the floor, and I was very, very upset.
I
But I
laughed at
love
it.
model cars like this. Oh,
Don't do it again. Don't do it again.
oh, don't laugh.
Oh,
No, I've ruined the box. You're supposed to keep these things in boxes. This is a
stop.
230. See, I used to have this car in this colour. Do you know that's beautiful, isn't it?
It is beautiful. You're ruining the box. Stop fingering it. Stop playing with it.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh no, I've split the top. Now look, I can fit my finger through.
Oh, stop fingering the car. It's not. It's not acceptable. It's the worst physical gag you could come up with to end this show.
I can fit 3 fingers in,
Oh,
Benedict.
it's too much. It's gauche. Well, maybe it's
Really?
a little
Wow.
alluring now. I don't know. Well, one figure. That's not enough. Come on, you know me better than that.
Never,
3. That's too much.
you never normally say that's too much. Thank you, Benedict. Nice to see you. Please like and subscribe below. And we'll be back next week with another Cristo putting the world right. Maggie Oliver's going to come on. She might come on next week. We're hoping to sort that out. So we'll see you then. Take care. Thanks, Benedict.
Ta-ta.